15 Scary Unexplained Occurrences, according to Reddit. Number 15. A week ago tomorrow, October 20th, I came home from class at around 11:30, and no one else was home. I hung out at home for a bit, and at 2:30 I was overcome with sleepiness. Being the bum that I am, I laid down in my bed and set a timer on my phone for a 20-minute nap. I fell asleep quickly, and after around 5 minutes, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening and had a split second of panic before my dog jumping up onto my bed and laying down next to me. I fell back asleep. After another 5 minutes of sleep, I instantly jolted awake because I was certain there was someone standing next to my bed behind me. I assumed it was my mother, who would likely be pissed that I was sleeping in the middle of the day. I woke and turned around in one movement, and there was no one there. Weird. I checked my phone and had another 8 minutes of sleep left. I went back to sleep, only to be woken up by my phone ringing. It was my mother. She said that my great aunt, who had been in the hospital after a stroke-like event for a week, had died around 1 o'clock. My mom then said that she knew my aunt was going to die today because she had seen a wraith, a sort of ghost, usually warning of someone dying, that morning. My mom is Scottish and very superstitious, but I don't believe in any of that. She said that when she woke up the morning to take my brothers to school, she went in my room to see if I was still asleep, and she saw a wraith standing next to my bed. My brain shit itself. Don't know why pictures are included. There's nothing in them. It's a picture of the living area. Note the 360 controller on the couch there. You got a picture of a door, and then the kids' room. I guess this is where the wraith was standing. Number 14. Family moved into an old house 200 plus years when I was 10. Uncle, weird guy, love that, was going to help us move in, and when we got inside the house, he got all weird and left. Always avoided coming for birthdays, etc. We always joked that he saw a ghost, and for some reason, we nicknamed the ghost Billy. When my little sister started talking, she would say really weird things, like asking if we could shut her door at night so she doesn't have to see the boy walking down the hallway. Fucking creepy. Anyways, we thought that she was also just being a big weirdo, so we continued to have this Billy the ghost joke. Something would get misplaced. Must be Billy. Yada yada. A few years later, we ripped up the flooring because we wanted to get back to the original hardwood that had been covered up forever ago by old owners. And if you know anything about old houses, you know that they used to insulate the floor with newspaper when newspaper had just become a thing. Decided to read some articles for fun, and some were talking about the first ever refrigerators, really cool things like that, until we got to the creepy part. A mentally challenged boy named Billy, who lived in our home, had died while playing outside of it. I saw a lot of shit growing up in that house, but I'm not a huge ghost believer. The newspaper was a fucking creepy coincidence though, given that for years we had an ongoing Billy the ghost joke. Uncle who ended up telling us years later that when he pulled into the driveway and was outside of the house that he just got this awful feeling. Well, there you go. Number 13. I know I'm late, but I have a good story for this. So, a few years back, probably 6 to 7 years, my family was living in our previous home. This was our second house. We had it in Ohio. The first house was about 2 streets over from our second house. Well, one night my mom woke me up and was actually really panicked. She grabbed my brother, who was probably 5 at the time, and told me to go outside. It was about 4 in the morning. And once we all were outside, my dad tried to calm my mom down. He asked her what was wrong, and she had explained that she had a dream that we were all gonna die from carbon monoxide poisoning if we stayed in the house. Then my dad told her that all the detectors were working perfectly fine, and we decided to go in the house. We didn't smell anything, nor did the detectors go off, so we went to bed. The next day, Mom was watching the morning news before we went to school. The first story for the day was the local family was rushed out of their home because of carbon monoxide leak in their home. which could have just been coincidence. But then the news station showed the house. It was our old house that we just moved out of. There's actually a few stories that are pretty supernatural that I have about my family, but this is the shortest one, to be honest. Well, there you go. 15, 14, 13. Number 12. I live in a condominium, and we own 2 apartments on the 7th and 8th floor. The only way to move in between them is to step out of the apartment, take the elevator or the staircase, and enter the other one. One night, we ran out of ice cream upstairs, and my mom told me to go get some from downstairs freezer. So, I took the keys to the 7th floor apartment, and since it was dinner time, no one was there. I walked into the pitch dark and realized that someone was sitting on the sofa, so I flipped the switch to see my dad just sitting there. It was kind of weird, but I just went to get the ice cream and asked if he had a key to lock up. No answer. I shrugged and thought, well, if he came in and locked the door behind him, he must have one. Went back upstairs, and my dad was sitting there eating dinner. I freaked out and asked how the heck did he get up here so fast, and everyone told me that he's been here the whole time. Told them that it wasn't possible because I just saw him downstairs, but no one believed me. Now I never go downstairs alone. Edit: to clear some stuff up, each apartment doors are fitted with 3 types of lock. Nigga, like I give a fuck. You know what I mean? I don't care about the lock situation on your pussy ass monkey. Number 11. Too long didn't read. Nigga, why you give me the... Okay. I can't even scroll up in a way that obliterated. Okay, come on now. Okay, good. Hunter/mountaineer here. It was a chilly December morning. Come on now. I hiked in, pre-dawn, taking about an hour and a half to go 3 miles off the beaten trail. Got to my nest about half an hour before sunrise and started to settle in. The wind kicked up and the fog rolled in that was thicker than milk. Within a few minutes, my visibility was 5 feet. I'm sitting tight, huddled up against the freezing wind, and then I start to hear twigs snapping close to me. For no apparent reason, what is normally a rapturous sound indicative of an imminently successful hunt, normal people don't fucking write like this, sent a frosty chill down my spine. I chambered around in my lever action 30-30 as quietly as I could, and I lay flat on my back tucked against a fallen tree. The rustling was moving closer through the fog, but I couldn't see anything. The sun was starting to peek over the mountains, and to my east, the visibility was starting to increase. The rustling of the twigs and the leaves was sporadic, sometimes directly in front of me, sometimes behind me or beside me. I remember laying there, rifle across my chest, thinking to myself how silly it was to react like such a coward. I rationed with myself that bears and mountain lions are a rarity where I was, and I had likely stumbled into a herd of white-tail that had bedded down. I decided to sit up. The rustling stopped immediately. As it was fully dawn by now, I was looking through the fog for the outline of my prey, which I had assumed myself was literally all around me. It wasn't. Seemingly nothing was. By now, the fog had faded away, and it was apparent to me that I was alone in those woods. I hunted all day without seeing so much as a squirrel. Around 3 in the afternoon, after fighting the wind in an abnormally cold day, and not wanting to hike out by flashlight, I decided it was time to start back to the truck. Walking out of the woods was the most uneasy I have ever felt. Lawfully, once you make it back to the trail, you're supposed to clear the chamber of your rifle. Not that day. What is normally a stroll through the woods, I undertook with the seriousness of an animal being stalked. I would walk, then stop and listen. I never heard or saw anything during my retreat, but I could feel eyes on me. I was about 100 feet away from my truck when I rounded the last corner and saw, hanging at eye level from a tree by a noose, a stuffed bear in a blaze orange jacket. I'm a giant broad-shouldered outdoorsman. But that shook me something fierce. Something fierce, did it? Did it shake you something fierce? Something fierce, it shook you. It shook. Something fierce. Number 10. Oh, godly. God, Jesus. Motherfucker. Number 10. I have a couple of weird things happen. My Pop-Tart incident still trips me out, but I think I can write that one off as maybe someone messing with me. The one that still scares me is an incident that happened at a cabin. It creeps me out for a couple of reasons. The first being that if it was all in my head, then I was in a really messed up place at the time. And the second being, if it really happened, then what the hell did I see? Here you go. I'll be the first to say that all this stuff could have taken place in my head. The mind is a freaky thing that can play some pretty trippy tricks on you. Sorry for the length. You should be sorry. Whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad always told me that in life, you should not be scared of a ghost. Fear the living, because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide, and I received an inheritance from you. Lucky you. At time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with a realtor and a lawyer. So for the month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, and headed up in my dad's car that he had willed to me to the cabin. Now, this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the year when we were not using it. I had keys to the cabin and also had the code for the alarm, so I did not feel the need to stop at the rental management company and advise them of my stay. This has nothing to do with this coming story, but felt the need to mention it anyway. Fuck you, buddy. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal, and nothing out of the unusual happened. Spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding, and evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music. Drinking and smoking out on the balcony. Had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVDs and PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. Bottom story had the living room and side guest room along with the small kitchen. Upstairs had 2 other rooms with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Is this an advertisement for your fucking... Most of my time there was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other 2 rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. Other doors to dark rooms always creeped me out anyhow. The 3rd day came around and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog. His name was Midnight, by the way. And he also since passed. Fucking, did he die of boredom listening to some pussy ass story you made this dog sit down and listen to? Playing games and watching DVDs. That day is what was pretty heavy snowfall, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in my car and decided to stay in. That's when things started to get a bit weird. In our area were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All the other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Tall. This is important later on. Well, like an hour from now, you got me reading this shit. Both these cabins were empty. From the past couple of days, I knew that no one was currently staying there. Gave enough background and and I'm going to jump into the weirdness. Around midday while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright, whatever. The prints led away from my cabin, and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees. Disregarded the footprints, and went back in the house. Nighttime came around. Was that the fucking name of the dog? Or was the dog's name Midnight? The dog's name Midnight, nigga. Nighttime came around and decided to head to bed. Forgive me, I'm just readjusting myself for the long haul here. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a standstill listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in the bed and stayed silent. I was kind of freaked out and could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only he didn't want to pee. Okay. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull on his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured that I was not going to go where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright. Maybe there are forest animals out there and he wants to chase them down, but fuck this. Did not want to chance anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking around on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing. The steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride. So it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the time considering myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. Fuck it, right? As soon as I was outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Must have been all in my head. What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my fear or paranoia? I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and the trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from our balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It was squatted on a branch and its arms were extended above its head, holding on to the branch above it. Fuck me. What the fuck is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and stood there staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed, but later on, in the night, I heard tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. And the weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open the door. But at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and not to do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed there, where I was. Passed out eventually and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was not eventful. She spent the rest of the week there, and nothing else out of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could not have been all in my head. A lot of stuff was going on at the time, so, he does admit that it could have been going on in his head. A lot of stuff was going on. I was pretty fucked up and all the drama, but still bugs me, even now after a lot of time has passed. I'm married now, have 2 young kids, but I am still partially afraid of the dark. You should be afraid of the dark. The fear of not knowing what's there is what's rational. Sounds weird to write that out, but oh well. I know what y'all want to know about, and that's that Pop-Tart story. And we'll save that for another time. You know what I mean? The Pop-Tart story. Jesus Christ, what was that number? Who knows? You know what I mean? Jesus Christ. Like what? 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. Christ. Number 9. This is right up my alley. Look at the length of that. I used to work doing maintenance at historic properties. There was a historic house museum I worked at when it wasn't open to the public. It was part of a whole landmark site. There was a visitor center with offices, and then the house was about half a mile up a dirt road in a wooded area. Sometimes I worked with a crew, but there were a lot of times I was there alone. One winter day, when it was really cloudy and dark, I was working alone to get ready to replace some electric work on the exterior of a house. I went inside and turned off the circuit to the whole property, and I tested it. It was off. I locked the doors and went outside to work. After about an hour, I got down from my ladder and started walking around the house, and then one of the lights inside the house turned on. I started to freak out, but thought maybe someone was playing a joke on me. I called the visitor center on my walkie-talkie and confirmed that the only other person who was working that day was still there and hadn't left, and that all the keys to the house were present and accounted for. That's when I freaked out and ran half a mile up to the office. I made my coworker come back with me to check out what was going on, but when we got to the house, the light was off again. But the bulb was still warm. All the doors were still locked, and the circuit was still off. Still gives me shivers to this day. That's so rational. Like, I love this because the plausibility is in him going, I know what I saw. I wouldn't have done this without, So he literally went to feel the bulb for evidence that it had been on. That's awesome. That's awesome. Number 8. Pretty sure I lived in a haunted house for a while. Strange things. For one, I always felt like I was being watched in my room. You are always being watched. This government doesn't play, homie. And if I had the door open to the hallway, I would swear I'd see someone walk by out of the corner of my eye. We had 2 cats, and someone's they'd be in my room sleeping. Someone's. We had 2 cats, and sometimes they'd be in my room sleeping, and then all of a sudden they would sit bolt up and stare at the door. And nothing I did could move them for a long time. This happened often. One day in my bathroom, the shelf that had my sister's beauty stuff randomly lose hold of all of the items. The thing was the shelf wasn't loose or hanging, and all of the stuff had to bounce out of a 2-inch high lip into the sink. One time in the middle of the night, my sister's 100+ 30-plus-year-old dresser she had gotten as a gift from our grandma just fell over. The thing weighed a ton, and it was built like a tank. Sister said she heard the sound of someone pushing. Ugh. Mom and sister used to yell at me for sneaking around the house, only I wasn't home or I was in my room. They said they saw a man in the shadows that was about my height. One day we also ran into an old owner, and my mom casually asked if the lady had ever experienced anything in the house. The lady started crying and said no one believed her, but yes, she experienced a lot of stuff. I moved out around that time. I do not miss that place. Not to freak you out, but there have been stories of homeless people living in unoccupied houses. Most famously is the story of the woman hiding in the closet and sneaking around for food when the owners were not there. But nigga, pushing over fucking furniture and dumping shit off of like if they want a place to live, they wouldn't be doing the bullshit. They'd be stealing food. Come on now. Number 7. In my childhood home, I would often hear touch typing coming from my computer downstairs early in the mornings. I didn't think much of it. My parents worked from home, and it wouldn't be uncommon to wake up in the morning to hear Mom typing away at the computer. One day I got up and called out to Mom, assuming that she was down there working as I could hear the typing. No answer. No one was down there at all. I was sure I heard typing. This began happening regularly. I figured I was so used to hearing typing from downstairs that I was hearing things that weren't there, so I didn't mention anything to anyone, figuring I was going a bit crazy. This happened on and off over a period of 6 months, the sound of fast typing and fast, curious clicking of a mouse as if someone was frustrated. One morning, I was eating my breakfast when I heard Mom at the top of the stairs call out to me, "You're not down there on that computer already." I froze and ran out to her. I was amazed she had heard it too. She was convinced she could hear typing, yet no one was there. I told her about all the times I'd been hearing it. Then my sister opened up and said that it regularly happened to her when nobody was there too. I wasn't crazy after all. I set out to try and catch whatever was causing it and to try and discover a rational explanation for it. I'd sprint out of my bedroom to the top of the stairs where I was able to look down into the room to see if anyone was at the computer, and no such luck. Every time I got there, it stopped. I think it went on for a couple of years, and we learned just to kind of live with it, as it wasn't every day. I was down there once when the ceiling light globe in the center of the room began flashing very fast, strobe-like. It then exploded, and glass went shattering across the room. I was lucky. I ran out of the room when it started happening because I was scared. The whole mysterious typing, you know. If I hadn't ran, I would have been hit with bits of light bulb. Around that time, I was on the computer at home by myself when something happened that resulted in me never being alone in that room again. I felt and heard this really sharp intake of breath directly behind my right shoulder near my ear. I've never ran so fast in my life and was hesitant going in that room ever again. Prior to that, the whole typing thing had been something weird and a bit spooky, not scary. Still makes my heart race when I think about it today. Have never really encountered anything like this before or since all of those events. I don't particularly believe in ghosts either, but I'm open to the possibilities of something in which scientists don't have a proper explanation for yet. Number 7. When I was 6 years old, I had a cat named Buster. Buster was actually my stepdad's cat, but because I never had a cat before, I claimed him as my own. Suffice to say, Buster didn't like being hugged and cuddled all the time by a little child, so he hated me. He avoided me at all costs. He was also an outdoor cat, so he would often spend most days outside and then come in for the night. One night, Buster didn't come back into the house. We usually fed him at night, so I was worried. Our area was also well known for an abundance of coyotes. My parents were being a bit hush-hush about Buster's disappearance, but I didn't get the hint. That night, when I was drifting off to sleep, Buster jumped onto my bed. He laid down by my head and let me pet him until I fell asleep. Honestly, I was shocked because he had never done this before. The next morning, I triumphantly walked downstairs and related to my parents that Buster now loved me because he slept in my bed during the night. My parents looked at me inquisitively and sat me down at the breakfast table to let me know that while they were outside the night before, they had found Buster's body in the alley behind our house. They thought he had been harassed by a coyote, but he was dead, so he couldn't have slept in my bed that night. To this day, I like to think that Buster just wanted to say goodbye and thank me for trying to love him the only way a child knew how. That's kinda nice. Number 5. I posted this a long time ago, but when I was younger, my mom was dating this guy who we called JB. And after a few months, he invited my mom and I and my brother to go with him and his son, about my age, out to this lake for the weekend. It was right on Lake Michigan, but up in a more secluded area, which was pretty awesome. Well, we got up there, and for one, I already felt really creeped out. It was smaller too, maybe 3 if you count the really big attic story house, and had living room, dining room, kitchen on the first floor, and 2 bedrooms on the second floor. His grandfather had helped to build the place with his grandfather's dad, and then he lived there for most of his life, working as a tailor in the nearby town. We went up to the attic to get some beach toys because that's where JB kept all the stuff, so he didn't have to haul it everywhere or every time he went out there. Well, when we went into the attic, I noticed in the corner, covered in some dust and cobwebs, about 8 mannequins, some just upper torsos and some full body. Not too out of the ordinary, considered a tailor had lived there. Me and JB's son slept down in the living room on the couch since there were no more beds, and near midnight-ish, I heard one of the stairs squeak a few times. Figuring it was my mom coming to check to make sure we were asleep, I told his son to be quiet and quickly turned the TV off and hid under the covers. After not hearing any noise for a few minutes, I looked out from under the covers and saw 3 of the mannequins moving around in the kitchen. Like their body parts weren't moving, but they were sliding around the kitchen. I swore I was dreaming, but was so terribly frightened I hid back under the covers with a small yelp, and then heard the dragging on the floor coming closer and peeked out, seeing one of them just a few feet from the couch. I hid back under the covers and shut my eyes tight, hoping they would go away. The next morning I got up and tried not to think about it, really hoping it was a bad dream. But when we went back up to the attic to put the beach stuff back, the mannequins were in different spots and weren't covered in cobwebs anymore. Don't believe me if you don't want to, but it happened. And I've been scared shitless of mannequins ever since. Nigga. That's some pretty creepy stuff. Okay. I'm a little late, but screw it. What are we on? That's gotta be like number 3. Number 3. I was in first grade hanging out at recess with a friend. He was shooting some hoops outside and I was playing DS. Sitting on the pavement, I remember him asking me if he could make a shot from halfway across the court. I told him he could try, but he probably wouldn't make it. While looking at my DS, suddenly my dad asks me what I mean. And when I look up, I'm sitting on my living room carpet talking to my dad, and it's dark out. I was sitting in the same position, playing the same game, same level, and same exact spot. In the level, everything continued normally that night, and I didn't tell anyone at the time, but looking back, it was really freaky. I thought it was like a dream for the longest time, but thinking about it, it really doesn't feel like a dream, and I don't really remember dreams that well. Well, I'm sure we've all had bits of lost time while playing video games, is the obvious joke to make here, but holy shit, the idea that this nigga could have really just like teleported like straight forward or somewhere. Not teleported per se, but kind of just like had time lost. You know, like he was living his life, but he didn't feel it, and then he just came to. That's creepy as fuck. Somebody says, sounds like anterograde amnesia. Usually people who suffer a traumatic event have it. Using myself as an example, I used to lose time, so to speak, and started to notice that I would just appear in different rooms of my house. It could have just been a one-time thing, but if you lose time frequently, you should see a doctor. That goes to you too, viewer. Number 2, right? It's number 2? Yeah, it's number 2. When I was in uni, I lived by myself. It was a nice little studio unit behind a house in a fairly decent area. I would honestly think nothing of walking places at night. There was a 24-hour McDonald's and a 7-Eleven that I would walk to, often between 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. since I was a massive night owl. Well, one day after finishing an essay at about 2 in the morning, I decided I was hungry, but didn't really have anything else to cook, so I decided to walk down to the 7-Eleven and grab a pie or something. You know how good 7-Eleven sounds to me as a fat man at all times. Delicious. However, as soon as I opened my door, I was overcome by a suffocating feeling of fear. My heart started pounding. I started shaking the works. Telling myself that this was ridiculous, I walked out to the street with the intent to still go, but that was as far as I got. I was terrified, for no reason that I could understand, but no less intensely despite that. I ran back inside and ate dry cereal. Later the next day, I heard about a group of drunk guys that were causing havoc down near the intersection at 7-Eleven. They'd beaten up someone from my uni. Even though I can't explain it, I'm convinced something bad would have happened to me if I had ignored that feeling and gone anyway. Number 1. There was a small door. Wait, this is number 2. Ain't that some shit? There was a small door that led to the attic space in my bedroom. 11 years old to 13. He didn't know where he was, somewhere in between that. And it became habit that I would just shut the door as I walked into my bedroom a couple of times a week. I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed my mom didn't close it all the way when she left it. After a while, I made a mistake of joking with her that she made a comment about me not picking up after myself. I said something like, "Every night I have to close the attic door behind you. How about you shut it all the way when you're done?" She then informed me that she hasn't been in the attic for months. Asked my brother, nope. Asked my father, nope. So then I started to pay really close attention to it. Your parents should have investigated that initially if, they believed their fucking kids, Because if she went to the trouble of asking your brother and your father, then perhaps she believes that, none of you assholes were doing this, which means someone else may be fucking going in and out of your fucking attic and then not closing the door after themselves like a piece of gingerbread fuckboy. So then I started paying real close attention to it, making sure that it was closed in the morning, checking it after school, checking blaster dinner, checking after dinner, then head up to bed and open. After a couple of months of wondering, studying, experimenting, I thought I'd see what happens if I just don't shut it. Opened the door before school and checked it after school, still open. Checked it after dinner, still open. Before bed, still open. Now I'm laying in bed, mind going crazy with this open door across the room. Decided to check it out, so I roll over and focus on the black space into the attic to see a face staring back at me. bolt downstairs. Wake parents, get ridiculed by my brother, switch bedrooms with my brother, move into new house about 6 months later due to expanding household. New physics teacher and his wife bought our house. I could have forgotten all about that event and chalked it up to me having an overactive mind. But then my senior year, I discovered how awesome our physics teacher was. Became my favorite class by far and my favorite teacher. End of the senior year, my friend and I took our VHS camcorder around town, doing most silly things, but then took it to my old house to see what they've done with the place. We got a very fun tour. I got to tell stories about all the projects my dad did that were still part of the house. Cool. Then the wife leads us upstairs, showing us the sewing room. I asked jokingly, "Notice anything strange in this room?" And her face goes blank. On camera, she asks what I mean, and I try to shrug it off, but end up saying something about the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, the attic door is open, then tells us that the second day of being in the house, their dog, German Shepherd, had gone into the room but would not go back downstairs. He stared barking and could not be consoled, and then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and then just running off. The dog did not come back until the next day and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads up the stairs since. Nigga, call the police. I had the initial thought that I could show my parents and brother the story I had on film, but I decided just to let it be. Did you show us the story, nigga? Because I don't see any links in this fuck ass. You know what I mean? A few extra details to satisfy the curious. Nigga, unless it's the video, fuck you. So here's number 1. I dreamt I was being choked and woke up to find my hands are on my own throat. You know, someone's getting tired of your shit, and it's you. Ha ha ha. What a fun way to end this video in a light-hearted manner or something, right? Oh boy. Oh my gosh, this jogged my memory of something that I'd completely forgotten about, says some douche. Woke up from an unsettling dream because my wrists were really sore. Turns out my boyfriend at the time had his hands clasped tightly around my wrists because I had a full-on tried to strangle him in his sleep, and he was trying to get me off his throat. To this day, I have no memory or idea why I was strangling him. Sleep strangling? You hoes are just going above and beyond, huh? Going above and beyond. Nobody in the comments is asking the dude for the video if he has it on tape. You know what I'm talking about? But I guess that's the world we live in. Did you like this video? No, you didn't. Because if you did, a wabam, you know what I'm talking about? A wabam, a shibble wibble sibble to the fribble dibbles. But seriously, you know, I hope you're having a good day and that everything's making sense for you. You know, because it'd be a shame if some scary, unexplained shit were to start happening to you. And you know what the worst thing about our society is? That everybody's so quick to judge that, you know, they would tell you what you saw. You know what I mean? Isn't it funny when everybody turns into your parents? You know, like they're just immediately your mom and they're so right that they can tell you what you saw and what you experienced and shit. You know what I mean? Unfucking believable. One day, just remember, everybody will die, and that on their deathbeds, these people will be forced to suck the fucking words that they uttered without thinking. You know what I mean? Without realizing that, you know, there are other perspectives other than your own. Other than your own. But one day they'll have to come to it when faced with their own mortality as they go sailing into the darkness forevermore. Enjoy your day, because our days are all coming. Later.